what exactly is the long-term vision for the future of the Minnesota Vikings? It's a pretty good moment to take stock of that. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you all so very much. My hashtag everydayers. Y'all make the world go round over here. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today, I want to zoom way out, 10,000 foot view or whatever the phrase is, and discuss the long-term stability, I guess, of the Vikings. It's pretty clear where the Vikings are at right now. They have one of the older rosters in the league. They have one of the youngest QB in the league, at least the youngest starting QB. I'm sure there's some 20-year-old undrafted rookie somewhere. And Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, Jonathan Grenard, Van Ginkel. It's very clear what the core of the team, the identity of the team is, and who they're built around, right? But what about next year? What about the year after that? What is going to have to happen in the next couple of years to sustain this? And the way I want to do this is to essentially go position by position and discuss the future of that position and those rooms. We'll look at some of the contracts. When are they due to expire? What's going to happen? And the goal here is not to sow doom about what's going to happen in the coming years. A few contracts are always expiring. A few guys are always coming around. A few new players always come around, right? Some players will not play out their entire deals, so this is far from comprehensive anyways. But more to assess the stability of where the Vikings are at. The Vikings roster is complete, I would say, in a way that rosters in the NFL aren't always complete. And I still have my critiques that, my cornerback thing or talking about a depth at wide receiver or whatever. There are critiques. There are things that can be improved. Obviously, there's no such thing as a perfect roster. But this is a pretty completed vision. And what I wanted to do was, okay, how long is this vision going to stay together? So let's do that. And obviously, the quarterback room is a pretty easy one. McCarthy is on a rookie deal. He's going to be the guy. For better or worse, he's going to be the guy for the next 3 years. So that can kind of set our window. Our 3-year win. And then that's what we've basically been sold by the Vikings as explicitly as they kind of can. They've basically said, we like this rookie deal thing here. This is our window. This is when we're going to try to, we're going to try to make this the Super Bowl winning team. And while I'm musing, because this is going to take all day to do, so we have some time to muse. Very rarely do you encounter an NFL team whose goal is not to win the Super Bowl. The expectations are different than goals, right? You look at a team like the Tennessee Titans, their expectation might not be to win the Super Bowl, but their goal certainly is, right? They're always going to walk in and try to do the thing. But their expectation is tied to Cam Ward, and can you inspire a little bit more excitement in the franchise and, win X amount of games? And so that's going to be, the expectation is maybe it can be defined as the threshold they have to cross so people don't start getting fired. For the Vikings, I don't think that expectation is very high. That is to say, it's another way of saying that there's a long leash for Kevin O'Connell, right? They can have some bumps and bruises this year, and people will still probably have a decent amount of faith. But the goal, of course, is to win the Super Bowl. But the reason I bring that up is that no matter where you are as a franchise, your goal is going to try to find a way to win the Super Bowl. I had a long debate about this on Locked On NFL with Tyler Rowland and the Steelers, and whether or not they were quote unquote all in. And my take on his take was they're all in because I think they are the oldest roster, and one of the only rosters older than Minnesota. They're one of the oldest rosters in the league. They just grabbed a couple other players that are kind of these short-term things. So they're in this very temporary state. And My issue with that, I guess, was more semantic. It was that's not necessarily all in. I mean, they're on the precipice of a rebuild because a lot of their star players are getting older, and there's nothing you can do about that. You didn't strategize to make your players older. That happens naturally. But because they have so many resources next year, it's hard to call them all. They're actually kind of holding a lot of resources. They didn't push all their chips in. They made a responsible call on the half blind. Like it's not that wasn't all in it. We had a big long argument about it. It's awesome, by the way, go listen to it. But let's say 28, 29, 30, even 2030. JJ McCarthy, let's say he plays well enough, he earns a contract. And he's expensive. Well, the goal is the Vikings aren't going to suddenly stop trying to win the Super Bowl just because the quarterback's expensive. They'll have to start figuring out how to make their cap work. They're going to start restructuring deals. Maybe they can't sign this or that free agent or whatever. Maybe they have to trade a player. They'll figure something out, right? Something will happen to sort of facilitate that. But what that's going to mean is that this 3-year iteration of the Vikings from 25, 26, 27 into the next, say, 3-year iteration of the Vikings, 28, 29, 30, will be different because J.J. McCarthy will be cheap in one set of the years and expensive in the other set of the years. And it'll be a different group of people. Plus, right now, there are players that just aren't going to be on the team for 4 more years. By 2028, Brian O'Neill is probably not going to be here. He's going to be deep into his 30s. Maybe he'll be here. Maybe he'll be on some kind of cheap thing, but we're going to be talking about him as the old guy that, does he still have this because he's 34? That's way far off though. So looking through this 3-year deal, just looking at the Vikings roster, who's under contract in the year of our Lord 2027. Let's move on to the wide receivers and Justin Jefferson. Well, let's do pass catchers all at once because as it stands, Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson are under contract for all the way through this window into 2027. Jordan Addison is not. We don't need to go full roster here, right? We can just do this. So that trio, and I've talked about how important the trio is for JJ McCarthy to have not only your 2 exciting receivers, but a good big outlet that you can, that's got a big catch radius that can win something contested in the end zone for you. And then these 2 deep ball guys, right? Or these guys that you can hit for, with digs over the middle, all kinds of really fun stuff. That trio is going to, at least 2/3 of it are scheduled to be together for the entire for the entire window. And Jordan Addison is the question mark here. His contract is expected to expire in 2026, right? Or not is scheduled to expire in 2026 right now. And next offseason, decisions will be made about everybody in the 2023 class about the 5th-year option. If they pick up that 5th-year option, Jordan Addison is also going to be part of this. So if we wanted to guess at whether or not he's going to get that 5th-year option, my guess would be yes. I know people are frustrated about the DUI suspension that he's going to get. I don't think that precludes a contract. I think that would actually be a pretty naive way to run your team. I think Jordan Addison's getting the 5th-year option, is I guess what I'm saying. And I think the types of players that don't is either players at a position where it doesn't make sense, like center. That was the Garrett Bradbury thing, and then they just extended him outright. Or players that aren't good. And Jordan Addison's very good receiver, 5th-year option, maybe even an extension. So all of that, future plans in place, pass catcher's good to go. Aaron Jones is also going to be in place for 2 of those 3 years. Kind of doubt that he's going to be a part of the thing moving forward, but Jones and Mason this year and next year, that's in place. And then in 2027, running back will be a huge need. Maybe you'll extend Jordan Mason or something. I don't know. You go crazy. So skill players, quarterback in place. What about the trenches? What about the defense? Let's get into that next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, which is the best place to find tickets to any event. But obviously, you're listening to Locked On Vikings, so you're looking for Vikings tickets, right? Are you going to the international series? London, Dublin? Because you can get lower bowl tickets reasonably placed, 20-yard line for less than $500. I'm looking at the app right now. That's insane. But you can find all kinds of things at Gametime. If you're not sure what to do on a weekend, you can use their zone deals, or you can use their curation features to figure out what you want to do. You can also look at a panoramic view of the tickets so that you can see exactly what things look like from that perspective. Make sure you're not stuck behind a pillar or whatever the venue has, and make sure you're satisfied with that. If plans change, the Gametime guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Moving along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for listening to Locked On Vikings every day. Hashtag everydayers who've been listening all week long and all summer long will remember a couple episodes. So yesterday, if you're an everydayer and you listened yesterday, and I did this big long thing about coverage structures and all that, and some people, at least YouTube comments, if you have feedback, were struggling because there wasn't like a visual aid. Well, this is a podcast, and the vast majority of people who listen to this podcast do so in audio. So if I start relying on visual aids, those people are missing out. And that's what Patreon is for. Patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. I've done all kinds of coverage stuff on Patreon. If you want to just browse through that, it's all free to watch at this point. The only thing that is for patrons is the latest one that I did, which is about JJ McCarthy and OTAs and all the little clips that we can see. We can actually examine some QB mechanics. We get some nice full body slow-mo looks at the way that he is throwing a football. And with everything that I've learned over the last couple of years about how people coach throwing a football and little mechanical hitches in someone's giddy up that can cause inconsistency, we can look for those pretty accurately. So I did that. Go check it out at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. Okay. Let's move on to the trenches and discuss the future of the trenches, right? Like, we understand Darisaw, Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Brian O'Neill. There's your guys, right? Of those guys, the only ones under contract through 2027 for the 2027 season are Donovan Jackson, obviously on his rookie deal. Christian Darisaw signs his big deal, and then Will Fries, whose contract has him signed, I believe, through 2028, right? Yeah. So big time 3 out of 5 linemen are there, right? Your tackle and both your guards, assuming that you're keeping Donovan Jackson throughout this and that he doesn't like flame out. But that leaves only 2 O-line positions that you have to figure out, and you can figure those out. I mean, Ryan Kelly will be pretty old by then. And again, Brian O'Neill, how much longer do you want to keep Brian O'Neill? I think they're grappling with that conversation now with how much security Brian O'Neill will want and how many years the Vikings will want to commit to him for, right? You might say, hey, a couple more years of Brian O'Neill is great, but if Brian O'Neill thinks that he can get 3 or 4 more years on the open market after his contract expires, he might say no to that stuff and hit free agency. So as it was, as it is right now, barring that extension, you got 3 of 5. That's still pretty good continuity considering we're looking 3 years in the future. We're looking through a window of 3 different seasons, and you're still going to have a lot of your O-line together. If this O-line works the way that I think it will, with how excited I am, it's pretty exciting that they get to stay together. And the D-line's kind of the same thing with the Andrew Van Ginkel extension now. In 2027, he still is going to void out. So it's not a contract year anymore. They added another year to him. But you still have Jonathan Grenard and Dallas Turner in the building. The interior is what's interesting. And I think that the future of the interior is one of those things that we're going to discuss a lot next offseason. Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave doing great. That's fine. And yeah, they are not on 1-year deals, right? They both are on 2-year deals. But they're both going to be that much longer in the tooth, and it's going to feel like this really great moment to go grab, Jerjon Newton, which is the guy that sort of helps usher Allen out of Washington, but kind of do our version of that. Next offseason will be like a really great sort of balance between the urgency of, hey, we've got an older player and we want to get a successor in, but like the safety of still having that guy in place, where it won't be the most urgent need that the Vikings have. And it might even feel a little weird if like Allen and Hargrave and Phillips all have good years and we're going, wait, we need a DT. These guys just did great. But it will be this great opportunity to like draft someone, bring them in. You'll be looking at all the like raw athlete kind of guys. And that's a nice place to be. But the future of that, I think, is a little bit more up in the air. And by the 2027 season, I think it's a pretty easy guess that you're going to have a lot more, a lot of different guys under contract. Plus, Harrison Phillips is all going. So after the 2026 season, all three of these defensive tackles leave at the same time. So this is very much a 2-year kind of bet on this particular build of D-line, and then all these guys walk out the door at the same time. If I'm Kwesi, I really don't want that to happen. And I think that's something that you could even take action now to avoid by adjusting someone else's contract, or, extending somebody that you like, one of these young players that you like, just to have some depth in the building. But what you never want, and there's a couple of pretty classic examples from the Vikings, you never want the light bulbs all to go out at the same time. You ever have that? Like if you buy a house and you install all the brand new light bulbs and then 10 years later, all of the light bulbs go out at once. You never want to have that at a position. The one the Vikings are dealing with right now is when all the light bulbs went out at corner at the same time after the 2019 season. Xavier Rhodes was older. He leaves. Trey Waynes leaves. Mackenzie Alexander leaves. Alexander did come back for a year, but it still left the Vikings with a completely bare cupboard at the cornerback position. They have not recovered. You can't argue at all that they have recovered. They've been piecemealing 1-year deals and washed up has-beens and, or throwing their lot in with draft picks that ultimately didn't work out. And you kind of are just hoping that this year will be different every year. And that's where we're at again. Even if you do think this year will be different, you can't argue that that's not the argument, right? And the one that the Vikings, I think, just got over, and it took them a whole decade, was the offensive line. In 2015, all the light bulbs went out at once. Matt Khalil, they kind of finally gave up on him. John Sullivan was injured and ends up exiting under that context. Phil Lodeholt exits under that context. Mike Harris was supposed to be the right guard of the future. He had played actually pretty good, and we were like excited about him as maybe this long-term dude. And then he gets, what's the word for it? Thrombosis? Like he gets his blood clots thing. He's out. And so suddenly you walked into that 2016 season with no idea who was anywhere doing anything on the offensive line. You still had Matt Khalil, and then he would get hurt by week 2 anyways. So that was like the most sure thing was Matt Khalil headed into that season. And you had like Andre Smith and, all of these, you had all of these acquisitions, and you had hope for all those acquisitions because hope springs eternal, but they're not all going to work out at once. And even if one works out, now you got to replace the other 4, and you got to replace them in time for the one that did work out to still be on the team. Or if he gets old or his contract expires, and again, you're playing whack-a-mole with the whole thing. The point I'm making is, if you are in a long lens view here, if you are a franchise and a whole position exits at once, leaving you with nothing, not I have players, but I'm dissatisfied with them and I want to upgrade on them. Or I have older players and I want to get my younger players. We literally don't have guys under contract. When you're in that situation where we literally have nobody, we're pulling a fan to play corner if we had to play a game tomorrow, that can plague you for a decade. It happened on O-line for a decade, and the Vikings are halfway through another decade of corner. So if this is a problem we do not have to deal with for 2 years, but if those D tackles do all leave and leave the Vikings with nothing, and that includes, hey, if they really like Taki Taimani and they think he's a starter and he's going to be the guy and they're going to upgrade him, then we're good. Or if they draft somebody in the meantime, then we're good. But if they let that get to that same point that they let the corners get to, and that they let the O-line get to, if this is Kwesi's version of those two big mistakes from Spielman, then it will haunt the Vikings for a decade. It's how it works. You can't acquire 3 good players in an offseason and just say, all right, we're good to go. It doesn't work that way. You can't Yahtzee. You can't rely on Yahtzee, I guess. Anyways, the long-term future at edge rusher, very, very secure. Long-term future at D tackle, there's an issue, but lots of time to deal with it and lots of ways to deal with it. So it's not something to panic over nearly, but it is something to understand that the consequences of not doing anything could be pretty severe. Secondary wise, boy, let's all throw our hands up. I don't know what happens there. That's next on Locked On Vikings. Look, I've spent enough time complaining about the sort of back seven of the Minnesota Vikings. If you must, if we must discuss it, I think one of the more interesting contract things that the Vikings are going to be dealing with is Ivan Pace, who is currently in, I think he's in officially the final year of his deal. He is a tenderable player. So an RFA tender to keep him under contract for next year seems like a pretty much no-brainer. It's dirt cheap, and there's nothing that Ivan Pace can do about it. He can try to negotiate a new contract, threaten holdouts, just try to make the thing happen. I'm sure if he approaches the Vikings and says, hey, I would love a new contract and I would love to commit, more years to this franchise. Let's get this done now. I'm sure they'd be really happy to do it. But baseline scenario, the Vikings can just slap the tender on him and say, go play for this, and we'll talk about it next year. And there's not a lot of recourse for Ivan Pace, short of the nuclear holdout option, which we've seen how that doesn't really work for people. So I would say that you kind of got 2 years of this linebacker crew. You've got Blake Cashman. He's under contract for 2 years. His contract is set to void in 2027. And Ivan Pace, who I think you can get team control through 2027. Pretty easy to keep those guys around. I will say Blake Cashman is in 27. He'll be 31, so I don't know what kind of contract you're going to be offering to that guy for his age 31, 32 season, and maybe you're going to want to go somewhere. But this is another one where the light bulbs could both go out at the same time, and you can have this really big issue in the center of your defense. That's probably the priority for the 26 and 27 off seasons, is going to be figuring out that sort of meat grinder middle of the defense, what the plan is. We got everybody in place for 2 years, so we have forever to figure this out. The thing is, the 2026 offseason is not going to be rife with a whole lot of resources. Right now, the Vikings are projected, and this is a very loose projection, but they're projected to be $60 million over the cap. Don't panic. A lot of that is restructurable. If you restructure just a few contracts, you can get that number down real quick. And the other thing, though, is that number might go up if Josh Metellus or Brian O'Neill get extensions this offseason. So something's going to kind of have to give there, but that's why everything we've talked about so far is pretty much good to go through at least 2026. The Vikings will not have any needs. They're not going to have to edit the roster at all. Their goal for next offseason is going to be to get under the cap with as little damage to this roster as possible. So the next 2 years are going to be major run it back. Okay, we went 14-3 with this team, with Sam Darnold. We're going to try to do the same with J.J. McCarthy, maybe go deeper in the playoffs, and then we're going to try to do the same thing again. We got 2 shots at this with J.J. McCarthy with this team, and depending on how things go, and depending on how contract negotiations and stuff go, maybe some of 2027 or most of this, the really important parts are still around in 2027. The Jeffersons, the Darisaws, the Hawkinsons, the Grenards, those guys are still in place for 2027, and then you might have to do a little bit of figuring around the edges. But that's kind of the trade-off, right? If you're going to have all of your team under contract through the next 2 years, you're not going to have a lot of cap space for those 2 years. It's not that they don't have resources. It's that those resources are allocated already. They've already made the choice for what they're going to spend that money on. That's fine. The thing is, they're going to have this middle of the defense little issue looming, and hopefully they can do something about that. But that something could be draft picks, right? Draft a D tackle, draft a linebacker, and I'm feeling pretty good. Extend Ivan Pace, and I'm feeling pretty good. If one of those depth guys, Jalen Redmond or Taki Taimani type dudes, Levi Drake Rodriguez, if one of those guys steps up and plays starting quality ball because someone got injured, which is very possible, every single one of these guys has injury histories, If one of those guys steps up and gets injured, then we're good. A lot of different things can happen. So don't mistake me pointing out problems for me saying that these problems will definitely be an issue. There are lots of things the Vikings can do about it. It's just that they have to do something. They have to do one of them. They have to pick one. All right, let's talk about the secondary. So there's not a lot under contract still for the 2027 season in terms of the secondary. Harrison Smith's contract is still technically on the books. It's like on this list, but it's going to void out. He'll be long gone by then. Josh Metellus is currently not scheduled to be on the team, but if he signs an extension, maybe he will. Theo Jackson will still be on the roster, but that's kind of it. And Byron Murphy. Oh, I should say Byron Murphy. So the only player on this secondary there's two players on the secondary, I think, that you feel comfortable including in the long-term plans for the Vikings. They're Josh Metellus and they're Byron Murphy. If an extension gets done, like it's very expected to, it sounds very optimistic about. If a Metellus extension gets done, you have those two pieces under contract through 2027. The problem is that's only two guys. And this is how it works, by the way, when all the light bulbs go out at once. You do sometimes have a 6th-round pick grow up and grab one of these jobs. You do sometimes have a free agent signing that works out like gangbusters. But for every Byron Murphy, you had to endure these sort of interim Bashaud Breeland seasons and Patrick Petersons that maybe played okay sometimes. Maybe they were abject disasters. Either way, they were never the long-term thing. And now, going into the 6th season after the light bulbs all went out in the cornerback room, there are 2 of 5 principal secondary positions are filled, and one of those guys isn't even under contract yet. I'm just assuming he will be. You got 2 of 5. It's really easy to suddenly just have no choice but to continually pick at a scab that will never heal. That's where my urgency comes from. I think it's one of the biggest things that has plagued the Vikings over the last 5 years is that they are constantly bending over backwards to piece something halfway reasonable together at cornerback, and those cornerback rooms have failed at huge moments in every one of those seasons. And last year we were pretty happy with those guys, but we all saw what happened on Thursday Night Football with Cooper Kupp. Like, we all saw what happened to them, what happened over the top with the Lions too. Like, I mean, everything broke down against that Lion in that second Lions game, but at the risk of repeating myself way too much, I'll just kind of say this. You really need someone to sort of pull up and become the guy. You need Mekhi Blackmon to earn that extension. Mekhi Blackmon is not scheduled to be under contract for the 2027 season because he was drafted in the 2023 season, right? So he can earn that extension, but we got to see more than we've seen so far, right? We need him to sort of grow up and take the job. Whoever that's going to be, you kind of hope that group will be a little bit put together. So taking stock of all of this, right? Over the next 2 years, I see, all right, you got to keep building on the corners. You got to fix you need a more long-term plan on the interior of the defense, both, on the ball and off the ball. And you need like a guard, like you need like a center and maybe extend your tackle. That's not like a huge laundry list. And yeah, a lot of your money is spent now, but that tracks, right? You have less stuff to do and less money to do it with. So everything feels pretty proportionate. I think this exercise to me shows that the Vikings are really, really ready to be a stable contender. They have set this thing up with the expectation of it being a stable contender. And that shouldn't be news to you. They've been saying that. Reporters have been saying that. Mouthpiece reporters have been saying that as conduits for the thoughts of the Vikings all offseason, that the Vikings fancy themselves as a team that can long-term contend, that can stay together and be in the mix year in and year out, and that's what they want. And it seems like they have that as long as the quarterback that they drafted is actually the guy that can deliver that, which is, of course, the big question surrounding all of this. But I don't know. The future of the Vikings looks a lot like the present of the Vikings. And depending on how we feel about the present of the Vikings and JJ McCarthy, that's either a really good thing or a really bad thing. But either way, it's the on-purpose thing. It's the way that they built, and they did this very much with the idea that this was going to work and that they were going to want to buy back in over and over and over and over again. Next week, I will be on the road. I will be visiting my parents. I'll be, if you are an everydayer, you might know the room with the cool retro Vikings pictures in the back that I'll be podcasting from via StreamYard. So if there's audio artifacts, I apologize. It's kind of out in the boonies and the Wi-Fi is here and there, but the plan is to podcast all next week from my parents' place, and then we're going from there to parts unknown elsewhere where I will not have access to a lot of Wi-Fi. So I'm going to have a lot of pre-recorded shows about Vikings history. If you are a history doc enjoyer, you might recognize some of the tales. And if you have not watched the history doc, it's at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, and get ready for some pretty fun storytime stuff. So that is the next couple weeks of this show. I will see you all Monday. And as always, Skol.